Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, put down your lab coats and your beakers for a minute because today we are really going to challenge, the fundamental definition of life itself. We're asking this pretty radical question. What if life didn't absolutely need carbon or water or even the ordinary matter we see around us?
Exactly. We're diving into a really detailed biological blueprint for life made entirely of something called self-interacting dark plasma and structured magnetic fields.
Right.
And this whole incredible idea comes from the work of an independent researcher, J. Alfred. He's mapped out how life might actually thrive in the dark matter sector, where the physics is just completely different.
So our mission today is to try and understand the plumbing, the energy, the genetics, basically, of a creature that Alfred thinks could represent a whole new domain of life. He calls it eukaryoplasma.
And this isn't just like pure speculation pulled out of thin air. The core idea is that these life forms would still follow Darwinian evolution, just like life here. They're just built from, a different and frankly much stranger substrate.
Okay, let's hit the obvious problem straight away. When I hear plasma, I think of, the sun, lightning, things that are incredibly hot, violent, unstable. How could dark plasma possibly be stable enough for life?
Right, that's the immediate reaction, isn't it?
Mm.
But the stability, interestingly, seems to be built into the dark environment itself. In the dark plasmasphere, there are a couple of key things that suppress those instabilities you're talking about.
Okay.
First, the dark electric charge is much, much weaker, like hundreds to potentially millions of times weaker than the normal electric charge we know.
Whoa. Okay, that's a huge difference.
It is. And that weakness means the forces needed to keep charges separated, which you absolutely need for any kind of cell boundary or membrane, can actually last for a really long time.
So it's a much gentler electromagnetic environment, almost.
Yeah.
Inert in comparison.
Second, the environment is really dilute. The surrounding dark plasma actually has about 5.5 times more neutral particles than charged ones.
Ah.
And those neutral particles act like a massive natural insulator, a buffer, weakening electromagnetic effects even more and helping to stabilize any charge separations inside a potential life form.
That makes sense. A calmer sea for life to potentially merge in. But,
Okay.
okay, let's talk about the big one, water. All life we know absolutely depends on water. Solvent, transport, shape. If this life is purely electromagnetic, what replaces water?
Yeah, that's a great question. But in this context, for this kind of life, water is basically irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
Totally. The substitute is an inherent property of the complex plasma itself, its liquid crystal property. This dark plasma isn't just simple ions, it's a complex or dusty plasma. Think dark electrons, protons, neutral particles, and even dark matter particles acting like dust. Alfred theorizes these could be cue balls, and this complex plasma can exist in a state that's sort of enervating between liquid and crystalline.
Liquid crystal. Okay, I know those from display screens, but how does that help a life form?
It's about control. Liquid crystals can maintain a specific controlled orientation of their particles when you apply a voltage or a magnetic field.
Right.
This ability to switch states and hold that precise particle alignment lets the plasma life form use electromagnetic instructions. Think of them like digital signals to control internal processes almost instantaneously. Structure, internal transactions, communication.
So it's way more active than just a passive solvent like water.
Exactly. It allows for a speed and precision of internal control that, just sloshing chemicals around in water could never match. It's like comparing, digital instructions to just mixing stuff in a beaker. It's an active instruction set, not just a passive medium.
Okay, that really shifts the perspective. We're moving from wet chemistry to, well, almost digital physics as the basis for life. So if the core medium is this instruction-capable liquid crystal plasma, let's zoom in, what about the cell structure? The nucleus?
Well, laboratory experiments, even with minimal plasma systems, have shown something fascinating. A kind of pulsating, self-contained nucleus can form basically a ball of positive charges surrounded by negative ones. And get this, mirroring the most basic life process, these plasma nuclei have actually been observed replicating. They split into 2 daughter nuclei. It looks incredibly similar to mitosis in our own cells.
Wow. But it's not biochemical. So how does it store genetic information? Is there a plasma DNA? Where's the hard drive?
No DNA needed. It's thought to be stored electromagnetically, more like computer memory.
Electromagnetically.
Yeah. And given how much information you can potentially store at the particle level, people talk about storing data in the state of a single atom, right? The potential information capacity is just immense. It bypasses chemistry altogether.
So the nucleus pulses, stores the data. It's like the CPU and the memory stick.
Mm.
How does it talk to the rest of the plasma body? How does it send out instructions?
Through something called alpha waves. These are waves that propagate through magnetized plasma. The nucleus basically encodes information by modulating its own magnetic fields, changing the amplitude, frequency, maybe the phase. Yeah. These modulations then travel out as alpha waves, like signals running through the body, directing activity. It's a dedicated, high-speed electromagnetic communication network.
That handles the control center. But what about the body itself? If it's made of plasma, even complex plasma, how does it hold its shape? What stops it just drifting apart? What's the skeleton?
Good question. The structure is theorized to develop into an ovoid shape, like an egg, but sectioned internally into concentric shells, like an onion, almost.
Concentric shells, why?
For stability. These shells apparently rotate, alternating directions, one clockwise, the next counterclockwise.
Wait, really? Like gyroscopes?
Exactly, generating gyroscopic forces to stabilize the whole structure, especially in a potentially fluid dark matter environment.
Wow, that's clever engineering. So we shouldn't picture these things as flimsy ghosts then.
Not at all. While the plasma itself might be tenuous compared to solid matter, the structure is stabilized by incredibly strong magnetic forces. Think about ball lightning. It's plasma, but it can be surprisingly robust, even exert physical force. This blueprint describes something potentially just as robust, especially within its native, dilute, dark plasmasphere.
Okay. Gyroscopic shells for structure. Where does the energy come from? If there's no chemical breakdown of food, what are the power plants? What are the mitochondria equivalent?
That role seems to be played by double layers, which are also sometimes called sheaths. These are thin layers that form naturally in plasmas, separating regions with different electrical properties. In this model, they insulate and separate those rotating concentric shells.
Double layers. How do they generate power?
Functionally, they act like capacitors.
Right, components that store electrical energy.
Precisely. They create localized charge separation, building up strong internal electric fields. This ability to store electrical potential energy and presumably release it when needed makes them a fantastic analog for mitochondria. They're the electrical powerhouses, managing electric potential instead of chemical potential.
And didn't Hannes Alfvén, the Nobel laureate, also point out that these double layers look a lot like biological cell membranes, like a skin?
He did, yes, because they also act as a protective boundary. These multi-layered sheaths effectively shield the life form's internal electrical state from the external plasma environment. It's crucial for maintaining internal balance or homeostasis. So yeah, it's a multi-layered protective skin as well as a power system.
Okay, so double layers are the power packs in the skin. Let's go deeper inside again. Complex life needs, well, a backbone for structure and a circulatory system to move things around. What handles that in plasma?
The backbone is described as a complex internal structure, basically a coaxial cable. Imagine two currents flowing straight up the center, but in opposite directions, carrying opposite charges.
Okay, counter-streaming currents. What does that do?
That flow generates a global dipole magnetic field around the entire life form. Just like Earth's magnetic field, it acts as a built-in shield against external radiation.
A personal magnetic shield, that's handy.
Isn't it? And then twisting around this central straight current, you get helical currents. These are also known as Birkeland currents. They sort of twine around the core, probably playing a role in moving energy and particles through the main axis.
So that's the spine. What about circulation to the rest of the body?
That seems to be handled by a whole web of smaller filamentary currents. They form a grid throughout the body, distributing energy, maybe nutrients like absorbed particles, and carrying away waste products. And crucially, the underlying magnetic field lines themselves, generated by all these currents, provide the actual structural framework. They are the skeleton.
The magnetic field is the skeleton.
Okay.
If the filaments circulate things, how does it get those things in the first place? How does it eat and breathe?
They're autotrophs, meaning they make their own food from non-living sources. In this case, they're likely electrotrophs or maybe photoautotrophs. They essentially just absorb dark electrons and dark protons directly from the surrounding plasmasphere.
Just absorb them.
Or potentially dark photons or axions, maybe originating from the sun, if those exist and interact appropriately. They don't need to ingest complex molecules.
Is there a specific organ for this intake? A mouth? A filter?
Yes. That function appears to be carried out by vortical structures, vortexes, generated by something called the Hall effect in plasma physics.
Okay.
These are described as specialized dual-purpose organs, often working in pairs like a double vortex system. One end spins one way and sucks in the energy-rich particles as the intake, the mouth, if you like.
Yeah, and the other end.
The opposite end spins the other way and acts as the excretion point. It releases the low-energy discharged particles, waste products.
And what happens when it excretes these particles? Does it just dissipate?
Apparently, this excretion process can generate weak radiation, which might appear as a kind of colorful aura around the life form. Think of the auroras here on Earth. It's a similar principle, electromagnetic waste disposal, essentially.
Wild. Okay, let's talk movement. And defense. How does a being made of fields and currents actually move? Does it have muscles?
Electromagnetic muscles, in a sense. For fine movements or adjustments, they might use density modulations. This involves using magnetic compression. They pulse currents to create strong temporary magnetic fields that literally squeeze parts of the plasma body, changing its shape or density. This pulsing could act like a pump or a contracting muscle.
Okay, flexing with magnetism. But what about getting from A to B locomotion?
Several potential mechanisms.
Right.
They could use electric winds, basically,
Right.
pushing off the surrounding neutral particles but making their own charged particles collide with them, generating thrust that way.
Right.
They could also use jet propulsion. Remember those intake-exhaust vortexes? They could suck particles in one end and forcefully expel them out the other, like a squid propelling itself.
A plasma squid.
Okay. And for potentially higher energy forms, the theory includes photonic propulsion, essentially emitting a controlled blast of dark photons for thrust.
Photonic propulsion. And defense. You mentioned those vortexes again.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit sci-fi sounding, but grounded in plasma physics. By rapidly twisting magnetic fields within those vortex nodes, they could potentially generate focused jets of collimated laser-like light, or maybe particle beams.
Laser beams.
For what? Could be multi-purpose, propulsion, as we said, maybe internal healing using focused energy to break down toxins or repair structures, but also potentially defense, projecting short, sharp bursts. Alfred calls them plasma bullets.
Plasma bullet for self-defense. That's quite an image. Okay, one last big area. Evolution. You said they replicate by fission, splitting in two. That could mean biological immortality if the split is perfect, but how do they adapt? How do they evolve quickly?
This is maybe one of the most radical ideas. Their evolution could be massively accelerated by endosymbiosis.
Endosymbiosis. Like how our mitochondria might have started, one cell engulfing another.
Kind of, but potentially much more direct and frequent. Literally fusing their body with another plasma life form, maybe of a different species, to instantly acquire new traits or capabilities.
Wow, so instead of waiting generations for tiny random mutations.
Exactly. Instead of slow, incremental point changes, they could gain a whole new set of electromagnetic functions or structures all at once. Alfred describes it as being like updating a software application, a modular upgrade. It would be vastly faster than conventional biochemical evolution, an incredibly rapid path to complexity.
This whole blueprint, it really does paint a picture of life that's almost a mirror image of carbon-based life, but using physics instead of chemistry. Double layers as mitochondria, magnetic fields as a skeleton, the electromagnetic nucleus as the genetic code.
Yeah, and what really stands out is how elegantly the physics seems to dictate the function. These complex structures, the capacitor-like double layers, the gyroscopic shells, the internal coaxial currents, they don't necessarily need complex chemistry to invent them. They can arise quite naturally from the dynamics of a magnetized plasma under the right conditions. Complexity from physics itself.
So, wrapping this up, if J. Alfred's blueprint is even partly right, if these kinds of single-celled plasma life forms could exist in the dark sector, what are the implications? What does it mean?
Well, we have to follow the evolutionary logic, right? If single-celled entities evolve, the next step is often cooperation, multicellularity. So just like life here, these plasma life forms might be expected to congregate, at least temporarily, to form complex superorganisms assemblies that function like a single larger entity, resembling multicellular life before maybe disbanding again.
Transient, complex plasma bodies.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a really big question for you, the listener, to think about. What level of collective complexity, maybe even intelligence, could these massive temporary electromagnetic beings achieve? What emerges when life builds itself not from molecules but directly from the forces of physics in the dark universe?